Are you thinking about developing a game, but you don't have any knowledge or experience doing it? Well, I was the same, so hopefully I can help you shed a little light upon it. Hello, my name is Andras, and I'm the sole game developer of NecroBouncer working under the name of Alchemy Ship. Today I would like to talk to you about my journey in developing this game. I'm not gonna go too much into technical stuff, just want to talk generally about how the thing started, what were like the major events, and where it is now. To quickly go through my background, I never worked in a game development company, and my programming experience was just 4 months of Java before I dropped out of college, and I also self-learned HTML and CSS for web development, because back then I was still thinking about a career in graphic design, so that seemed like a good thing to know. I always believed that making games on your own is basically impossible, except if you go to this like college where you learn a bunch of complex things, but this wasn't really possible in my country, especially not for free like the rest of our educational system. Luckily though, this wasn't the belief of everybody, so around 7 or 8 years ago I met this guy that's now one of my best friends, and he's been working on some really simple game in the game engine called Unity, and I didn't like understand everything he was doing, but it kinda made sense to me. I had that little background in the programming, so I kinda understood what he was doing. Like, I didn't understand all the rigid bodies and classes and whatnot, but I kinda got it, you know? So I just decided, maybe I should try it. After this, I bought myself a pre-recorded course online on C# and Unity, and for 2 or maybe 3 years I've been just learning and playing around in Unity. I've made a couple of games alongside the course and even started a couple of my own, but I've only finished one, and while working on that one, I got the idea for NecroBouncer, which back then was just a clicker game where instead of clicking, you would go around the dungeon and fight enemies. So as you can tell, the game went through a lot of changes before it got to this point. At the start, I was planning to make a mobile game, and for the first 2 or 3 years, I've been working towards that and even got to a point where I believed the game was good enough to be pitched to a publisher. I think I even commissioned an artist for cover art at this point. Anyway, I sent my pitch to just a couple of publishers, just a couple that I thought were really good and kind of fit the whole theme that I was going for. Just a few of them replied, and none of them were interested, and the main reason was that the game was mobile. One of the publishers even asked me if I was ever thinking about making the game for PC, which I did. And at that time, it was basically the final drop in the bucket. Like, I always hated making the game for mobile because I had to incorporate monetization. I was planning to make the game free to play, so that was the only way to make it potentially profitable. But because of that, I had to make a bunch of deliberate bad design decisions to incorporate some of the more grindy stuff in the game to give players something for them to buy or to watch an ad or whatever. So I'm super thankful that the publisher asked me this, because I was in no rush, I had a full-time job, so I just decided, you know what, let's try it, let's just change the whole game. After this, it took me another 2 years, I think, to get the game to the same level, at least to the level that I believe the game was good enough to be pitched again, and the game changed a lot. I didn't just change the input system and the UI, I changed the whole game. Like, all of the monetization had to be removed, and all of the mobile game stuff had to be removed, and because of that I had to rebuild a lot of the things from the ground up. So the more I did that, the more the game transformed into a roguelike that it is now, and I think that was the perfect fit for the game. So after all that time, I pitched the game again, but this time I prepared a lot better. I researched how to do a good pitch and build a website for it. I got some counseling on how to talk to publishers, where I also got some feedback on my pitch. And lastly, I gathered a much bigger list of publishers that are interested in indie games, and I sent my pitch to all of them. This time, quite a few answered, and actually some of them were really interested. One of them also suggested that I should put the game on Steam as soon as possible, which I agreed 100%, and I did it in the coming week. To my surprise, because I put the game on Steam, a couple of really cool publishers found my game and asked me if I'm looking for a publisher. And one of them was Raven Age, with whom I also worked with in the end. After talking to them a bit, I've sent them my pitch, and they were super happy with the game and the amount of funding I was looking for, so soon after we struck a deal. That was around the end of 2021, and we started working together at the beginning of next year. At that time, we decided on a release date and also made up a plan for the game's development up until then. Because of that, my workload increased quite a lot, so soon after I decided to start working half-time at my day job, and because of some other complications, I fully quit at the end of April. Since then, I have been fully focused on the game's development and have so become a full-time indie developer. I'm very happy that I managed to finish the game and release it, because there are many obstacles that will get in the way of doing that, and a lot of the projects just die out and are forgotten. But if you're on a similar journey, I would just like to share a couple of things I learned, skipping the really obvious ones. I assume you're working alone, which is a very hard thing to do because you don't have to answer to anyone. This often means that you'll make bad decisions that prolong the game's development, sometimes to a point that you never finish the thing at all. To avoid this, you can try to plan the game as much as possible. Think about what mechanics the game will have, how they're going to be presented, do they make sense, are they fun, and also try and explain them to your friends and family, because when explaining ideas, bad ones will stick out like a sore thumb, and just the fact that you have to explain them to someone will have you think more critically about them. You should also make some sort of a schedule and really try to stick to it. Try to also get a friend or a family member in on it and have them check your progress at each milestone that you've set. This will make you more focused on what's important and get you to finish the game in a timely manner. You can always polish at the end, but also try to reserve a set amount of time to do that, because you can really quickly fall into a spiral of endless polishes and improvements, and you really don't want to do that. Another thing is to try to make the vertical slice of the game as soon as possible, which means to make the whole game's loop as soon as possible so it's a standalone thing and can be tested easily, you can send it to friends. What that means is just try to think of the core mechanics first, test them out, see if they even work, but right after you're happy with those, make the starting menu, make the end menu, just make everything the game needs so you can build it, and it's then much easier to test it, much easier to send it to friends so they can give you some feedback, and that's really important, especially early on when you have the chance to avoid some really big mistakes that will cost you a lot of time later on. And lastly, don't feel ashamed about using assets. If you're not a good artist, use art packs. If you're not a good musician, use sound libraries. If you're not a good programmer, there's tons of assets that help you build up a certain part of the game. These are just tools and you should use them. Otherwise, you might get stuck spending hundreds of hours working on some things that are just basic for every game, instead of you focusing on what's unique for your project and making that as good as possible. Oh, and of course, you can hire some help as well. I commissioned an artist way before I got funding for the game, and even though it was a lot of money for me back then, the amount of value it brought to the game, like how it made the game way more presentable for the publisher, it's just worth it, so definitely do that. All of this is of course just advice based on my experience. I'm in no way an authority on this, but these are just some of the things that I would do and I will do differently for my next project. So this is where I am now. NecroBouncer was released in December of 2022, and after that I've been focused on making the first major update for the game. With it, I hope to address most of the major issues the game has, and I'm not talking about bugs, those were mostly fixed with the first couple of patches. I'm super happy with the update. I really believe the game is much better now and players will get a lot more out of it. But because the game isn't really successful at this moment, I'll have to start allocating most of my time to my next project, but hopefully I can return to this one later on if it gets some more interest. Anyway, this is it for now. I'm curious to know what's your experience in a solo dev journey, and maybe if you checked out my game, I would love to hear what you think about it, because I'm still striving to make it better. I hope you enjoyed the video. I plan to make more content like this in the future, but in the meantime, I'm gonna link my Discord server down below if you wanna have a chat. Otherwise, I'll see you the next time I decide to make a video. Cheers!